Hi, everybody. Very good afternoon to one and all. I'm Dr. Arpita Mehrotra, and on behalf of Westford University College, I extend a very warm welcome to you to this exciting webinar. Very burning topic, though. But before that, let me introduce you to something our college is always associated with. Westford University College has pioneered in bridging academia and industry. Its webinar series is an initiative by the college which aims to connect the industry leaders and experts, not just with the academic community, but with diverse audience on a wider platform. This is a relentless effort by the institution to explore industry trends and the performance across the modern day organizations. And this is associated on a very diverse and a very varied range of topics. Our goal is to make sure to bring together the bright minds, rather the brightest of the minds, to share their opinions, which are idea focused on varied subjects, along with fostering the learning and the inspiration. We are here to connect you all to our own journey and therefore share the opinions and expertise and learnings. And most importantly, have some nice, provoking conversations which really matter. And that is why we are here to you, I'll repeat, which really matter. And we are here to talk about a wonderful topic, a very burning topic, which is building gender equality in business. And that gives the flag to us to think, yes, this is important. That's a perennially burning topic. That's what I feel. I read somewhere, gender equality is the unfinished business of the 21st century. Achieving gender equality and empowering of women and girls is the fifth goal among 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And when we speak of workplace gender equality in business, it is basically achieved when people are able to access, they're able to enjoy the same kind of rewards, resources, and opportunities, which is regardless of their gender. And the aim here is to make sure that you achieve broadly equal outcomes for men as well as women. Not necessarily they are exactly the same for all. However, in the pursuit of this, it may require for businesses, the workplaces, the industries to provide equal pay for equal work of comparable value, or maybe it requires the removal of the barriers to the full and equal participation of the women in the workplace, or it requires access to all occupation and industries, maybe including the leadership roles, regardless of the gender. Then similarly, elimination of discrimination on the basis of gender. So discrimination, pay, leadership roles, occupations, industries. Let's count on everything for the session today. But what happens once we define this crucial role? Unconscious bias are very unintentional perceptions and beliefs about the things and the people formed by the stereotypes inherited through socialization. In the workplace, unconscious bias is expressed through automatic categorizing of the skills and roles based on employees' gender, race, and physical attributes. An equal world, as World Economic Forum has often suggested, is a better world for all of us. So when equality grows, communities are healthier, businesses are stronger, economies rise, and the world is a better place for everyone. Wow, so nice and said. Companies that have diverse leadership have often been able to outperform than those who do not possess that. But there is always a but to all these nice sentences. But today's approaches to gender equality are largely ineffective. Maybe we have gone a bit higher, but still, the journey is still a lot. The latest World Economic Forum Gender Gap Report suggested an estimation of a staggering 257 years to close this gap on economic participation for women compared to 202 years in the last year's report. unfortunately, I don't think it is coming as a surprise to us. Companies that are gender and ethnically diverse are up to 35% more likely to outperform. That's what McKinsey and the company suggested in 2019, workplace and women in it. So why aren't we doing a lot to make sure that we have more advanced gender equality? So most corporate leaders today, decision makers, they believe that we are already addressing the gender equality. And conscious or unconscious, something gets in the way, and that is the blind spot. The leaders, the decision makers, we are only a part of the picture instead of the total landscape. And that is where we limit the way we act, the way we react, the way we behave. It limits our effectiveness because the focus is on the picture. And many of us as a women today, we consistently persevere to contribute in the professional development. But few has been tremendously successful in carving a niche, in going an extra mile for proving it big. And therefore, we are very fortunate today to have an achiever among us who personifies the words of Michelle Obama. There is no limit to what we have as women can accomplish. The speaker today has not just achieved for herself. Rather, through her venture, she is doing a great job to help many professional women around. We are here today, all inquisitiveness right here to understand the real state of gender equality. And once again, let me take this opportunity to welcome our speaker for today, Mrs. Helen McGuire. She is the co-founder and MD of Hopscotch, formerly head of digital content at Impact Proximity. She launched Hopscotch in the March 2016 while 7 months pregnant, with a mission to enable professional women to play a part in the workplace in the Middle East, no matter what their professional commitments. The company now employs a strong team across events and recruitments, has welcomed thousands of women to its ranks, placed and trained over 500 women since launch, and regularly runs training, skills, mentorship, and other initiatives to further empower and network women. Helen also leads on United Nations Women's Empowerment Task Force in the UAE, and she is also a mom of 2 children. She lives with her husband here in Dubai. Just understand her a little more. She moved to Middle East in the year 2012 to join Impact Proximity. Helen successfully grew the digital content team from scratch to encompass key client work across the Impact Group regionally and globally. On taking a maternity break to have a first child in the year 2015, she began to understand the pressures that was felt by women who wished to work, but they were unable to find the flexible options to suit their family commitments. And therefore came the idea of Hopscotch, which was born and grew with the help of her husband, Mr. Justin McGuire, who is the CEO of MCG Recruitment Group. Helen had spent 12 years in London prior to 2012, working in the digital and music industry, primarily for BBC. She successfully piloted and presented her own music radio show in 11 countries globally. And she's also DJed internationally as a hobby. So she has been a DJ as well. On moving to Dubai, she was the first female resident DJ at 360 Jumeirah Beach Hotel. An avid explorer, she has visited over 35 countries worldwide, and her spare time is learning photography. That's an amazing background, amazing learning we look forward to from today. And we believe, I'm sure a lot of us will have a lot of queries and understanding to hear from her. So a warm welcome to her. And Helen, can we have you now, please? And absolutely up to you and over to you to hear. We're all ears, please. Can we have you around, please?
Your very, very warm welcome. That was one of the nicest welcomes I think I've ever had, actually, to any of my events. So that was great and very in-depth. And welcome everybody.
Thank you, Helen.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. So I'm very excited to be here today, very excited to be invited to speak on, as you've rightly said, an enormous topic that really is extremely close to my heart and affects everybody in the world, whether you are male or female, and whatever level you are at professionally. So we're not in a room together as we might normally be. And so I can't read the room. I can't see whether you're falling asleep or not. I can't see whether you're engaged or not in what I'm saying. So before we begin, I would just like to get a sense of who's out there. So I'm going to launch a couple of polls here. And this first one, hopefully you can see that now. I would like to know, please, where you are in the world. So I'm going to give a couple of moments for you just to finish that. I think right now it looks like everybody is in the Middle East. So I can't see who's actually answering this, but I'm gonna trust that you're all busy typing away. Okay, I'm going to close that poll now. So yes, we are all in the Middle East now. I'm actually based in Singapore, so I'm a little bit further away from you. And I want to get a sense really of where you're at the moment. So are you currently in full-time employment is my next question to you. So yes or no, very simple. Hopefully you can all see that. Okay, so the majority of you looks like you are employed right now. We just have 10% that aren't. Okay, so 91% yes in full-time employment. Great. And I want to get a little bit deeper now. So this is very relevant, obviously, to the topic at hand, building gender equality in business. Have you ever felt discriminated against in a professional environment? There is obviously no right or wrong answer to this question. Wow, okay. Oh. So we've got a sort of 60-40 split here, I'd say. I'm going to close this poll in a couple of moments, so get your last votes in. Okay, so we have 53% saying yes, 41% saying no, 6% saying not sure, and last but one question, I think, have you ever felt bullied in a professional environment? Okay, we're still getting quite a positive response on that. Is everybody finished? We're about even, okay. Yeah, almost exactly even. Okay, so yes, 45%, no, 47%, not sure, 8%. Yeah, sometimes it can be really difficult to know whether someone's bullying you or not. And finally, here you go. Do you believe you hold a bias towards others in any way? So that could be conscious, unconscious, based on anything at all. Is that your belief? Okay, we give that a couple more moments. Get your last votes in. Yes, okay, that's no great surprise. So, yeah, we had 33% saying yes, they feel that they are biased, and I would love to speak to you and see what that involves and what you feel that might be about. No, 47%, and not sure, 20%. So that's the end of the polls, and it really was just an opportunity to get to know you. Like I said, I can't see your faces. And the responses are no great surprise to me. So actually, the majority of people do feel that they've been discriminated against in some way, whether that's based on culture or race or gender, or many other factors within a professional environment. Bullying is very common, although it's not really spoken about. And unfortunately tackled even less in some situations. And also, it's not a surprise to me that most people feel that they are not biased. Now, that's the one I would challenge, and that's really where this plays into building gender equality in business. A recent UN report, global report, suggested that 90% of people, both male and female, hold some bias against women. Now, this kind of got swallowed up, this report, because it came at the same time as COVID hit. And it did make headlines, of course, but there wasn't any huge kind of response or debate around it as there might normally have been. But certainly my evidence and experience goes to show that that is indeed the case. So whether you believe it or not, the vast majority of people have some bias, and the vast majority of that is unconscious, so you will not be aware of it. So hello, my name's Helen McGuire. I am the founder of Hopscotch.work, and I want to explain a little bit more about why I'm here speaking to you today. But before I do that, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So I have a very colloquial style in terms of my presenting. I tend to draw very heavily on my experience and my knowledge. I don't have a university degree in gender equality. It's all been learned on the job. So if you feel that I'm rambling on, and hopefully I'm not, I'm usually quite concise, but if you do feel that, then please feel free to raise a hand and ask me to move on, or if something's not clear, very happy to answer questions where possible as we go. I hopefully won't be speaking too fast, so you'll understand what I'm saying if English isn't your first language. And we are planning to keep this to around 30 minutes, might go on a little bit longer, and then with some Q&A at the end. So I want to move on now to the 3 key areas that I'm going to be covering in this talk. I want to call them the 3 key leaps. And those leaps around building gender equality in business are structured around the YFactor, so specifically around awareness, why you should be building a gender equal business in the first place. The what factor, so what are you doing to make that happen? What is there out there to support that, and what's actually happening? And the how factor, so how does all this work together, and really what does the future look like? Now, I want to take you back to explain a little bit more about why I'm here and why I'm speaking to you today. To 2015, 2016, I first, when I first had the idea for Hopscotch. Hopscotch, as quite rightly introduced, is a professional women's careers platform. We have a reach now of around 80,000 globally, and we work with multinationals and larger regional companies to help them connect to professional female talent in many different ways, whether it be through events, through jobs, through opportunities, through training and skills and employer branding. So we tick lots and lots of boxes. But back in 2015, when I had the idea for Hopscotch, the landscape was very, very different. I was in Dubai. I just had my first baby, and I decided whilst I was on maternity leave to join a photography class. As introduced, I am currently still learning photography. And when I walked into that class, I was expecting it to be full of students. And in fact, it wasn't. It was full of women who were probably slightly older than me, who had kids who were already at school. And when the teacher went around the room and asked why they were there, their answer without fail was, well, I'm just a mum and I'm here because, I have some spare time on my hands and wanted to learn how to use this camera. The teacher then asked them, well, what did you do before you were just a mum? And the answer was, well, I used to have my own business, or I used to be head of corporate in a legal firm, or I used to run a PR department. They were all very senior, very accomplished women who on a Tuesday afternoon found really nothing better to do than to learn photography. And that's fine. But at the end of that call, several of those women came up to me and said, look, we know you're on maternity leave. We know you work for a big organisation. Can you help us get back to work? And at the time, my answer was, well, unfortunately not. I'm not in a position to hire. That's not my role. And now I don't really know whether we offer any kind of flexibility. And it really set a kind of fire for me in terms of what needed to be done in this space. Back at that time, there was nothing around flexible working for women. There were no such departments as diversity and inclusion. That kind of thing just really didn't exist. The very topic of gender equality was kind of couched around feminism, was seen as something almost quite niche, particularly in the Middle East. And I think the Middle East, had a lot of catching up to do where this topic was concerned. And I started to do some research. I put a survey out there to women in the UAE, asking them what it was that was holding them back. And 98% of them said the main reason that they weren't going back to work is because they couldn't find any kind of flexible work options. Now that's almost every single woman who wanted to get back to work couldn't, because the working world simply wasn't structured in a way to welcome her back. And when I thought about it from a business perspective, certainly from my professional experience, and I spoke to other business leaders, they did need people on a more flexible basis. They did need people not necessarily to be in the office, 5 days a week or in very structured hours, but they didn't know how to connect this pool of talent. So it really was kind of connecting this huge pool of talent that was kind of sitting out there, wanting to do something, wanting to support their family, wanting to use their skills and everything that they'd learned, but had no real opportunity to do so. And the businesses who, were kind of ready to engage with them, but there was no real impetus. But, they had an interest. And that's really where Hopscotch started. I hit go on the business at 7 months pregnant, which isn't necessarily to be advised, I wouldn't say, but it's got me where I am today. So there you go. And I could see very quickly people registering. So women registering on the site, one after the next, after the next, after the next. And very, very quickly, within 2 or 3 weeks, I was speaking on podcasts about stuff I really didn't know a great deal about. I was being contacted by companies like HSBC who wanted to do 3-day events. I'd never run events before. I really did just kind of take a huge leap off a cliff and built my wings on the way down, hoping that businesses wanted to tap into this network, hoping I could build this network, and hoping I was the right person for the job. Having really never worked in the women's space before, my prior experience was very kind of male-dominated areas. And that's really where it started. And as I mentioned back then, there really was very little awareness, although there was an appetite to do something about this. And the way in which I think, this has changed over the last 4 or 5 years of me being working in this industry are probably in 3 key ways. So I imagine you've all heard of the Me Too movement. Now that was a huge change in terms of how women were addressed in the workplace and how they were seen from an external perspective of obviously equality. Now, for those of you that don't know the background, this started in 2017. It was obviously based around the Harvey Weinstein scandal and very much focused on the Hollywood community, the acting community, film industry. But it has had huge repercussions the world over. And the reason for that is because it's helped to reform working policy, certainly. It's helped to address some of the issues of inequality within business, not just in the film industry, but much, much more broadly than that. It's helped to raise funds for legal cases, which again has just pushed this whole issue to the surface so that people are far more aware that, if very famous actresses can come under this kind of scrutiny and be hit with things like salary pay gaps and lack of respect at work, then this is happening on a daily basis to so many professional women out there. It's raised awareness specifically of power and the place of that power where gender is concerned from a political perspective, from a hierarchical perspective, and really the kind of lack of women in certain areas and the lack of women at senior levels as well. So from a social perspective, that has really altered, I think, the game where the why is concerned, where why do we need to do something about this? Why is this important? Why does this change things? The second way in which I think things have changed over the last 5 years or so will be some of the reports. So they were mentioned briefly in the introduction, but they're really quite prolific now. And I want to just give you some of the stats that I always highlight when I speak about this kind of thing. So you can see here, these are 3 reports. The first one from McKinsey, the second one from the World Bank, and the third one from LinkedIn. So 15%, that's the increased likelihood of profitability for more gender diverse teams. And that's a number, that's a very basic number actually. It's a much cited number from a McKinsey report, but many other reports have that number much, much higher, up to 25%. So there's a real kind of business case for having more women in business. This is not just a nice to have, this is a business imperative. And that's what so many of my clients, as I'll go on to explain, really focus on. The second number there, 34%. Now this unfortunately is the share of women in the workforce in the Asia Pacific region where I'm currently based, and only 6% at partner level and above. So you can see there's a real drop off there. And that happens across all industries. It happens across all regions of the world. For those of you who are slightly younger grads or at university right now, it's quite likely you'll join the workforce with lots and lots of other women, and there is much evidence to show that actually there are more women graduating now, particularly in the Middle East, than men. But as you move up that scale, that drop-off occurs. And there's lots of evidence to show that the more women you have at senior level, the more profitability that company has. So it's not just about the numbers of women that you have, it's where they are in the organization. So one of my clients, Linklaters, has very kind of structured evidence to show that. And the last figure there, 71%. So this is the number of businesses that want to achieve gender parity. It's a top priority for them. It's certainly not the number of businesses that have gender parity. I don't know what that figure is, but it's definitely far lower than 71%. And that's from a study from a recent study from LinkedIn. So those are 2 ways in which I think that the Y factor and the awareness has increased. These reports, as I've mentioned here, and the Me Too, the kind of social understanding and the social drive and the power really of social media in so many ways to make a huge difference. The last way is in the rise of the gig economy. Now this also is impacted from a COVID perspective, which I'll talk about in the last part of the talk. But this has had a huge impact because it's enabled women to become part of the workforce in many ways. So an increase in flexible work, even though, yes, I mean, there is certainly some consideration around whether this is always a good thing for women, because the gig economy doesn't allow for all the nuts and bolts and packages and securities and so on that regular permanent work allows for. But it does give women that step back into work, and particularly in more developed economies like the US and the UK, this is a kind of huge opening up of opportunities for women. So that's why I feel things have changed very broadly over the last kind of 4 to 5 years. And I want to move on now to the what. So what has this changed? What has this kind of enabled, and what are businesses doing with this kind of knowledge and with this sort of social push and this sort of landscape change where gender equality is concerned, where suddenly it's something that really kind of has to happen, and there is a real business imperative. So what are they doing, and how are they doing that? So I'll split this into three parts: the role of social structures, the role of corporate practice, and the role of law. I'll start with social structures. Now, this kind of taps into, yes, social media, but that's not entirely what I mean by this. These are social structures that were touched on again in the introduction. They were things like the United Nations Women's Empowerment Principles, which are 7 principles that fall under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And Sustainable Development Goal number 5 is gender equality. Now, these types of structures, UN Women, UN Global Compact, UN WEPs, give companies an opportunity to understand, to showcase, and to learn best practices for gender equality, and not just gender equality, all sorts of sustainability and equality issues. But we're talking about gender equality specifically here. And this is really an opportunity from a professional perspective to be part of a much broader network, to do something from an international, with an international focus, and to learn from others within business about best practice, about how to approach these types of things and what other businesses are doing. The other kind of less formal social structures that I think are equally important. So organisations like Elevate, organisations like Lean In, which I'm sure all of you have heard of, Sheryl Sandberg's organisation, which is now global with chapters all over the world. Whatever industry you're in as a woman, you're not reliant on business to give you these opportunities all the time. You can go out there and find them yourself. Network, join industry bodies and groups that are relevant to you and your skill set. Find these opportunities yourself. This, I think, is super important, and it really gives people a voice. It really gives people a sense of being able to do something for themselves. And aside from that, there are so many advocates out there for gender equality. Michelle Obama touched on in the introduction there. Of course, Oprah. The list is enormously long. You follow hashtags on Instagram, hashtags on Twitter. This is kind of a social movement, and there is a huge amount of support out there for women, whether it be person to person or whether it be in the form of webinars, videos, reading, books, whatever. This is kind of how the social movement is manifesting in society, is manifesting in culture, is manifesting in the way that women are seen and the way that women are showing up really on a daily basis. And that is having a huge effect. Now, when you add to that the role of corporate practice, then it becomes, slightly more magical and powerful. So where corporate practice is concerned, this is really the power that private enterprise has. It taps into, as I mentioned, UN Women and UN Global Compact and UN WEPs, but it really kind of gives corporations a blueprint, let's say, of the ways in which they can create more gender equal businesses. Now, I suppose here I can talk a little bit more from a personal perspective, having worked with corporates over the last 4 years. The types of companies that we work with, Nestle, MasterCard, Facebook, HSBC in the early days. I could go on there. They all have their own ways and means of doing this kind of thing, getting to much more of an equal playing field where gender equality is concerned within their businesses. And I think some of the most successful strategies I've seen, I just want to touch on here. So definitely policy. So things like training and support for women and for men. So this is very much including men in this conversation. This is not just women talking to women about this. We know, what we want to achieve. We know where the problems lie. At this point, it still is the case that the majority of men out there are the decision makers. That unfortunately has not changed in the last 4 years too dramatically. So there is no point in just, occupying an echo chamber as women. Any kind of policy or practice within corporates or within society needs to also involve the other 50% of the population, which is male. And it also follows within organisations. This cannot just be a top-down approach to gender equality or to bias or to any kind of diversity and inclusion strategy. Yes, it needs to come from the top. It needs to be driven in terms of the belief from the top, whether it's HQ, whether it's C-suite, but it needs to involve everybody within the organisation. So it can't just be HR. People need to be empowered to be doing their own things. They need to believe in what's happening within the organisation. And those types of things can be anything from internal committees so that everybody has a voice. They can be flexible working practices. They can be maternity and paternity leave. And these types of things need to flow across the organisation, whether you're a new joiner and, you want to take a sabbatical, or whether you're somebody who's about to have a baby and wants to take maternity leave. These types of things should be seen as integral within an organisation. And I think too often they're just focused on women. So it's just women who can have flexible working hours because they need to pick the kids up. It's just women who can take 3, 4, 6 months off because they're having a baby. That's not how it should play out, because then all the onus and all the juggling, this is a word that's attached to women so often and completely unfairly, it is on women. And actually these are life issues. These are things that everybody wants to achieve. Everybody wants to perhaps have some time off to go and explore different things, whether it's because you're having a baby or because you want to travel. Dads also want to spend time with their kids. It shouldn't be the case that it's just mums who are doing school runs or mums who are getting maternity leave and paternity leave isn't an option. It also makes a huge difference in terms of where women drop off within the organisation. So there's an example from Finland where they have very equal policies for men and women on maternity and paternity leave. And in that country, they have the highest percentage of women returning to work after having a baby. It's over 80%, which is much higher than many other countries. So these types of policies not only affect women in the workplace and everybody, business within the workplace, but they also affect women's careers and where they kind of drop off and where they come back in. The other things that I think we've seen that have worked really, really well, yes, definitely support, definitely training around unconscious bias, training around hiring practices, but also specifically initiatives like return to work, things that Nestle regularly do with us, such as kind of open forum training. So basically going into the community and helping to upskill women around interview skills or CV writing or networking, or whatever it might be, which we do regularly with our clients. So there's lots of sort of opportunity both within an organisation and outside of an organisation to really engage with people and to give them the best opportunity possible and to keep those doors open. So that is how I see the role of corporate practice and the role of private enterprise. It really is in their best interests, not only from a business perspective internally to retain their talent. It costs a lot less to retain that talent than it does to recruit and retrain talent, but also, to attract women who may have fallen off the career ladder back into their business, really has a huge impact on their bottom line. And that's something that the most successful gender equal companies understand. So those like J&J, P&G, Unilever, Nestle, Netflix, and so on, all of whom, we speak to, we understand where they are with things, and, for some of those, we work with them as well on various different initiatives. And finally, I just want to touch on the role of law. Now, you might think that this is, 100% the key to all of this. I actually disagree with that. I think it's extremely important to have those guardrails there, if you like. I mean, if you look at the UK, where law is concerned, any company over 250 people has to display on its website how many women are in the organisation, at what levels they're in, lots of other data that it has to report on. That is UK law. On the other hand, the UK has had gender equal policies since the 1970s, and yet still we see gender pay gaps within that country between men and women. So yes, law is great from a guardrail perspective, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to change. And I think where the UAE is concerned, there's certainly been a huge amount of progress for gender equality based in law. So I know that the government is a very good example there in terms of gender equality in cabinet. And the laws have changed where maternity leave, extending maternity leave is concerned. And many of the public companies within the UAE also have some great practices like nurseries on site for kids and so on. So, there has been a kind of huge leap forward, and it definitely helps. It helps kind of set the bar. But I think it's really when these three areas come together, when these three areas hold hands, when you're listening to what's going on out there from a social perspective, when you're really tapping into that and also empowering yourself to understand what that is as a woman. When as a corporate, you're then putting that into practice, you're kind of modeling that in your organization, and everybody in the organization is on board with that, and everybody is empowered to take part in it. And lastly, when law, kind of comes into play and says, no, this has to happen, this has to change. And then that can be interpreted and pushed beyond in so many ways in society as well. So those three key areas, I think, are really what marks out a gender equal business and really builds towards gender equality in business as well. I see we have a few questions here, so I'm just going to pause for a second. No, I can't see those. Anybody? No, we're good. Okay, good. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to move on to the final section now, and that is around the how, really. So how can we move this forward? If that's already happening, and yet there are still gender pay gaps, there are still issues with a lack of women at senior levels. What can really change? What's missing, and what's next? And here I really want to focus on now. So I focused in the first part about the history, about the last sort of 4 or 5 years. In the second part, much more around the structures and the laws, so the things that I've seen in my experience happening over time. And I want to focus on now kind of how I feel this is going to change and what I feel needs to happen. So yes, I think those three areas that we just talked about working together, that's absolutely key, and that's definitely not the case for many businesses out there. So there's a huge leap forward that needs to happen there. But in terms of the current situation, I'm actually very positive about the impact that COVID-19 will have on society where women are concerned. And I know there are so many headlines out there right now. I get sent them every day about the negative impact that COVID will have on women. And I think in some respects, in the short term, that's definitely true. And I'm not going to argue against that. I think, it's bringing to the fore those domestic issues that sometimes dog women, which are that they are currently at home having to homeschool. It's this whole juggle word again. Homeschool, look after the house. Husbands may be busy working. Their work is taking a back step if they have work at all anymore. I know certainly within the legal market, It's many of the men who are getting the projects right now. That's, direct news from some of our clients, which is incredibly sad and will set things back, I hope, only in the short term. But it's bringing to the fore those old kind of stereotypes that this is a woman's place and this is a man's place, which I think we've all moved past. I think we all recognise that, certainly in the more developed world, that is not necessarily the case. And I think we will rise up against that. And I think COVID is offering a new way forward where professional development and where business is concerned. And I just want to run through what I mean by that. So first of all, working from home. The new normal. So companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., have all announced work from home policies. If not for the rest of the year, then forever. And whilst I think we all agree that working from home permanently is perhaps not the ideal situation, you do need to be out there mixing with colleagues and so on. This is a new way for women to have some equality, because previously, as I mentioned in my introduction, one of the major issues around work for women is the lack of flexibility, the fact that they had to be in an office for a specific time, or they had to be at work for a specific time. Now, that is not the case when you're working from home. You can kind of do things a little bit more on your own agenda. Companies are finding different ways to monitor individuals. Obviously, we're all very familiar with Zoom and these types of webinars and calls right now. So this really marks an opportunity for women to apply to jobs that previously they might not have been able to. The destruction of the office and even head office culture, I think, will have a huge impact as well. So, we're all on an even playing field in many ways, because it's not a case that women are at home and, their husbands are in the office, or their colleagues, or those that they have been able to get jobs, male or female, are in the office and kind of moving ahead. We're all in this situation, so it's much more of an even playing field where that's concerned. And it has kind of destroyed pipelines for many companies. So the way in which companies are working has changed. Lots more companies have many more online services now. They've shifted their businesses in many ways. So the people that they wanted to hire previously might not be the people that they're looking to hire in the next kind of 6 to 12 months, which again kind of opens the doors and evens the playing field further. There's also much less travel involved. People can't get on planes. And that is one of the barriers, particularly for senior women joining the workforce, that we kind of see taking more senior roles, or not being able to take more senior roles because they can't travel. They can't both be traveling as working parents, and so they haven't been able to take those more senior roles within businesses. That is going to change. We can't travel, we can't get on planes right now. And I think from a business perspective, travel will definitely be reduced. It's a huge cost to business, and I think people are seeing there's a different way of doing it. It's also a huge cost to the environment, and sustainability is a big buzzword right now. Finally, I think, who has been proven well to work in a crisis? Well, if we look across the globe, those women who are leaders around the world, so Jacinda and Angela and Sai and Sana, etc., who I'm sure you've all seen on social media, are leaders of countries that have been very successful in containing the virus. And Jacinda is an unbelievable leadership model. In the way that she's handled not just this, but many other crises within her term. And she's also, a mum who gave birth in office. So I think having those kind of female leaders up there demonstrating that, women who have children have a huge role to play in society, have a huge amount to bring to the table, specifically in some cases, once they've had children, they've learnt many lessons along the way. So they are not to be resigned to the house or outside of the workplace. There is so much more they can bring if these structures are in place, if these companies and society and law enables this to happen and makes the space for women within business. So finally, I just want to touch on what I think still needs work. I think there are three key things. I think transparency is one of them. There are projects out there right now, one of which I know is launching next week, very excitingly, which makes things much more transparent in the way in which businesses are behaving, the way in which businesses are showing up, and what they're doing where diversity and inclusion and gender is concerned. And that brings me on to my next point, I suppose, accountability. So where these kind of social structures are, UN WEPs, law to a certain extent, corporate practice, being held accountable for what you're doing and having a kind of reporting structure really does make a huge difference and moves things forward. Partly because you can see the progress that you've made, which everybody likes to see, but also because it means everybody else can see the progress that you've made as well. And in many cases, you are reporting now to your HQ, you are reporting to your board members and your shareholders. So this is really important. And I guess that brings me to my last point, which is measurement. Really kind of understanding how these policies and practices behave, alter, and improve business is absolutely key to making the business imperative towards gender equality in the workplace. So I hope that all made sense. Thank you very much for listening so patiently. Again, I can't see you, so I hope none of you have fallen asleep, but I would love to take some questions. And, this is a very broad overview, quick run through, I guess, in the time that I have. So very much looking forward to hearing from
everybody. Thank you so much, Helen. That was very insightful. And I think now we'll have lots and lots of questions probably to come up. And it was very insightful in terms of all the views that you've shared, the impact of COVID, why, how, and what the structures, the social structures. I'm sure everything plays a very, very crucial role. Now, I would request everybody to drop in your questions. I think we are already set here to answer the burning questions, I'm sure, inside, and how we are going to really fight this challenge of bringing more kind of equality. So, Helen, the first question we have for you is, this is by Ravi. The question is, what makes us to think that there is inequality in gender fundamentally in business? What makes us think that?
Well, I just do it. If I were you, Ravi, I'd do a quick Google search, and I think you'll probably get more than one answer to that question. Hopefully, I've partly answered some of that question within my experience over the last kind of half an hour or so. I think the one thing that you could definitely point to that you put a value on from a quantitative perspective is really the salary gap. Is really that gap that I think you mentioned at the beginning, actually 257 years to close the salary gap between men and women. Now, when I first started the business, it was somewhere around 180. So this is actually getting worse. So if you want a kind of quantitative look at what needs to change, then that would be a key starting point, I think.
Right. I think that's a very valid point. I think salary gap remains a permanent evidence of the proof that, yes, we are still striving for this inequality in the gender, indeed. Another, I think it is more like a statement and it's still a query from Annie. She says, considering the ratio of male and female here in the UAE, male being more than women and the type of jobs available and considering the weather conditions, is there still a need of corporates to involve everyone? Take, for example, a construction company with the kind of the job it involves, we end up finding women mostly in the HR positions. And especially now, we have an influx of ladies who are taking male positions as well. So the query is, does it really have to be women for all the roles? That's a big question.
I mean, that is a huge question. Of course not. I think, we are not categorically saying here that there should be quotas. That's something that's debated very, very fervently should there be 50-50 quotas within business? No, you need the best person for the job. And I think that's fully understood. I think what comes into play in all respects is the unconscious bias and the way in which those hiring processes work. That means that, who you think is the best person for the job might not always be the best person for the job, because as I mentioned at the beginning, 90% of people are biased against women. So this is actually something that we're working very, very hard on right now, because there is this kind of sense that, you might get women applying, but they are not making it through to the end of the funnel. Why is this happening and how can that be addressed? And on the construction side of things, there is an organization out there called Wild. I spoke on a panel for them last week, actually. They're based in Dubai, run by a very lovely lady called Emma Burdett, who works in the construction industry and is very, very passionate about women within that industry. They do exist. Yes, they are in the minority, as they are in many industries like that. But, there is this kind of push, and they don't all exist in HR. They might not be on building sites, but, they're definitely in other departments as well. So, these types of things are changing. And as I said, that's such a good example of a societal structure that's really kind of pushing that forward and bringing up the awareness of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the challenges are still there. There are many industries which will still have women to come to the forefront and still see the dominant roles. Another question we have is from Sumarita. She says, on average, financial literacy is low for women compared to men, financial literacy. How can financial literacy be improved among women in developing nations?
Thank you, Samarita. It's not a topic that I'm have any kind of expertise in. I have to be honest. From my experience in terms of financial literacy, it depends actually where you are in the world. So here in Asia, for example, there are lots of female financial professionals. We also found in the UAE that when we had finance positions, we didn't have any problem filling those from a female perspective. But I do understand your question, and I think what I would say is, again, this comes down probably to society structures. There are, if you look up different groups, there are many kind of free resources out there that help women to improve with financial literacy, and that's from a very sort of basic level right up to how women should invest. Elevate was set up by a banker from Wall Street called Sally Krychek about 20 odd years ago. And, Elevate really is, it's not just a financial group or institution, but certainly, that is part of their, is part of what they try to do to educate women on how to invest. So there are many, many kind of groups and communities and organizations out there that help with this, because it is very key.
Yeah, I think I will also add on to what Helen had absolutely said, that yes, of course, this is a very separate topic altogether, because right now I think it's more about bringing the equality and then going at par with financial literacy. It may complement each other, and only then we can see everything rising in the future. That's absolutely true. We have another question. It is, how can one tackle gender equality at an individual level? This is a very valid question. As women generally tend to feel sidelined, what could be the dialogues that we should be encouraging as women, so that you have a position for yourself as an individual in a world that we are in? And I'm sure you would help us in knowing those things. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great one, actually, because like I said before I started Hopscotch, I had no real notion of this. So I'd worked in very male environments. I never really felt particularly discriminated against. But now looking back, I can kind of see that I just accepted many of these situations that I was put in. And I'll give you one example, which was I'd put together a presentation when I was working in the advertising industry. I was supposedly head of my department, and I took it into, it's for a very, very key client. I took it into my boss's office and said, what do you think of that? And he said, this is brilliant, it's great, it's what we need, it's perfect. And off we went to the client's office, myself, my boss, and another guy. It was mostly men in the office, another guy, and we walked into the client's office. And my boss and the other guy that was present, the client was at her, she was at her desk. My boss and the other guy that was present pulled up chairs. There were only 2 chairs in the room. Pulled up chairs to the client's desk and proceeded to present my presentation for me while I kind of hung around very awkwardly at the back of the room. That's not acceptable. And I think, at the time I was just kind of like, oh yeah, you like my presentation, and I just kind of felt really sort of proud and happy about that. Looking back on it now, it's entirely unacceptable. And the reason I mention that is because since I started Hopscotch, I'm now in a position where my feed, so my Instagram feed, is full of inspirational women. It is full of trainers and coaches and advocates and organizations and communities out there who are constantly pushing positive messages to women and constantly pushing ways in which women can lift themselves and talk to themselves better and talk to their peers better and really kind of understand the sort of, what's going on in here and what are you saying to yourself and why do you not feel confident and why should you not go for that job and why should you not?
Yes.
And so this is kind of, I think you put yourself in that position. I mean, it's said that you are the sum of the 5 people that you find yourself around the most. Now, if that's the case, then it has to be said that it's one of the reasons that I'm able to do talks like this, because that's what I see on a daily basis. That's what I'm told on a daily basis from my social media feed, because, I only really have Hopscotch on my social media. I don't really have my own.
It's a constant battle in the brain that you have to constantly remind yourself that yes, you have to do it. That's how you have to.
Exactly, and it's all out there, and this stuff is free. This stuff is just a choice that you can make. So I completely agree that these dialogues are, can be extremely negative where women are concerned, can be impacted in terms of your day-to-day and your environment and so on. But it's really up to you to change that. It's really up to you to put yourself in a positive
position. Absolutely.
Because
the society, I think the societal pressure is itself ready to tell you that it is easier to drop your individual self and to get accepted. That is, I think, is an easy way around. But yes, I think very, very rightly said, it's a constant reminder to your own selves that keep telling this. Excellent. Please drop in more of your questions. Meanwhile, there is a view one of the person has presented. She says, Annie again, she says, this is regarding the COVID advantage that you mentioned. And she says, not sure of my view, but I feel to some extent working at home can be a disadvantage if the employer isn't really considerate of women's challenges. Despite not being in the office, women still have to take care of family, especially more now as everyone is home. Yet they are required to contribute the same way as the men, who some might not be sharing the responsibility with their wives even at home. This is a real-time challenge she's talking here. And maybe when kids start school, a little weight will be taken off from the women's shoulder. Overall, I feel depending with the job, women are still facing the same challenges during the COVID period as they did even when they were going to the office. And I think many women might agree with the fact that, yes, I think the responsibility working from home probably have increased for them. What do you say?
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing with that whatsoever. I have 3 kids at home. My husband is obviously working from home now, but I found that responsibility of the homeschooling and logging them on and off of Zoom and all of this sort of stuff, like that has fallen to me. My kids are still really young and they do look to me much more than they're 5, 3 and 1. So they do look to me much more than they do my husband. That is, that's the way it falls right now. I guess my point about COVID is that it's changing the business landscape. So yes, I completely agree that everybody is struggling right now. You know, no matter whether you're working or not working, of course, you know, everybody is under increased pressure because the kids are at home, and you know, you may have lost jobs, been made redundant, financial pressures, etc., family pressures, health pressures. But my point is that in the medium to long term, this will even the playing field for women. This will really make a huge difference in the way that business is done to an advantage of women. And that's what I genuinely believe.
Right. Yeah. And that's why one of the persons says it seems that the gender inequality is across the board employment, home, society at large. I mean, it's a huge challenge, it looks like now, that everybody is talking the same language.
Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, when I talked about those structures, society plays such a huge role in this, because it you know, and I think this question around your own internal dialogue as a woman is a brilliant question, because it really kind of brings to the fore, you know, one of the issues outside of business that's the problem. And like I said, you know, that can't be addressed by business specifically unless you've gone into an organisation that gives you this kind of training. This is really for your own personal development and your road to getting to that point. So it really is key. The way you see yourself is quite often the way others see you. So that needs to be tackled first and foremost. And like I said, there are, from a society perspective, that's why I feel things have moved forward. There is so much more awareness. There is so much more help out there for women.
Right. The social structures are very important. I think one step at a time may be of immense helpful to bring gender equality more acceptable in the community. I have one question, Helen, for you. You also mentioned about the Me Too movement. That has been a very, it has been taken in a very right approach by women, but it has also been very controversial. And because you spoke about a lot of factors, and it takes a lot of courage to stand by, and not just to speak for yourself, but also to speak for women and stand by them. So how are you able to differentiate, especially in this world of media and with so many opinions around, how do you differentiate the two things? The first is being really helpful in terms of women upliftment and feminism. And the typical feminism tag that it is very easy for the social media to put on. How do you differentiate when it is about, when you say Me Too, there would be so many who would say, oh, she's feminist. And then you, on the other hand, you're trying to really help the women around, to just uplift them. How do you tackle this challenge? I think most women, not just at the social media level, at your position, in day-to-day would face this. That if you speak a little about yourself, your opinions, you're feminist. How do you differentiate? When we say equality, this is the biggest hurdle.
Okay, so first of all, I don't think feminism is a dirty word. Yes. That would, you know, that would be probably my first and my last answer to this question. I had a long conversation actually. So a good friend of mine, Rana Nawaz, who is the founder of When Women Win, which is an international podcast that some of our attendees may have listened to. I said we are having this conversation, and she's been involved in a kind of women's space much longer than I have, so I sort of look up to her as somebody who knows a bit more than I do in many respects. And I said, oh well, yeah, but you know, I'm not feminist. I mean, yeah. I'm not a feminist. I just think that all women should have the same opportunities as men. And she said, well, that's a feminist. And I said, oh, I'm not, you know, and it does have this kind of negative connotation, and I get that. And I was talking to another friend of mine afterwards, and she said, I think it's the, you know, anything with "ist" at the end of it tends to have negative connotations, you know, activists, Islamists, whatever it might be, like somebody who is very conscious about their beliefs, that almost has a negative, you know, many of those "ist" words have very negative connotations. Now, feminism shouldn't have a negative connotation, because really I see myself as, if I want to put a name on it, I see myself as an equal, somebody who believes that that people are not equal, but that they should have equal opportunity, that they should have equality and an opportunity to have the same opportunities as everybody else. Now, when you're talking about women, that is feminism. You know, that's really what we're not saying that women are better than men in any way whatsoever. That's not the point. It's just about this kind of equality and equal opportunity. You know, hence building gender equality in business. It's not about having the same numbers. It's not about being the same people, having the same attributes. It's about having the same opportunities. So, you know, that's kind of that would be my answer to that. That number one, it's not a dirty word, and number two,
exactly, you're right. Yes, I think the negative connotation from the word has to be removed, and the society has to accept that fact. We have one more question, Helen. It says, do you think this inequality is one of the reasons why number of women in higher positions are less?
No, so I don't think that what can I say? This is kind of a never-ending cycle, really. So yes, of course, like the inequalities at lower levels and on all of the kind of causes that I talked about are impacting women at senior levels. But there are so many factors that come into play where women at senior levels are concerned. Yes, it's to do with law. Yes, it's to do with society and structure and people's understanding of roles of women in many ways. And yes, it's to do with corporate practice. So, you know, it's all of those things that add up and kind of compact that kind of force women off the career ladder and don't give them an opportunity to come back in. But there are many, many more reasons why that's happening. And it's one of the key reasons why there's such a big salary gap between men and women, because, you know, if women aren't holding top key positions where the salaries are much higher, then you're always going to have that gap, because you'll have, you know.
Yeah, I think the salary gap will always exist. That's very true.
Yeah, and unless you get women at the top, then there's really no way of addressing that unless you have a massive overpreponderance of women at lower levels to cancel that out. So, yeah, I mean, that, do you think this inequality is one of the reasons why not women have to be left? Yes, but I think the inequality is not just one thing. There are so many different factors that come into play there.
That's very right. There's one more question now. When you speak about the maternity leave and other workplace policies, which is trying to really help women come back to the job, but many a time, don't you think when companies, they have taken steps to improve upon these kind of policies like maternity leave, and yet we see the workplace gender gap which continues to grow. So don't you think that maternity leave or similar kind of policies maybe have acted as a career inflection point which is uniquely affecting women?
Yeah, of course. Like maternity leave is a huge inflection point where women are concerned, and I think, you know, the companies that have done it the best. So I think I mentioned the Finland example where you have equal, like, shared paternity and maternity leave, so that mums and dads can both take a step back and share that load over the course of it. I think it's a year or maybe even 18 months. But there are also many other companies that have successfully implemented support around maternity leave, because actually, you know, it's very daunting as a human being to suddenly over 9 months have your life completely turned upside down.
Correct.
And you know, when you first have a baby, you have no idea how you're going to feel or what you're going to do.
Right.
I didn't know whether I would go back to work. I thought maybe I'll just turn into, you know, someone who's very happy to stay at home with my baby, and that would have been completely fine. That isn't what happened for me. But you know, you don't get usually any support from your company or your organisation to help you with that process. And what we try and do at Hopscotch, for example, for our return to work initiatives, is we give modules and training, remote training, so video support that helps women to come back into the workforce. And what the most successful companies do is to have a kind of mentorship process. So when you know somebody's leaving on maternity leave, you're assigned somebody within the company so you can keep checking in. But somebody also who's been through this and understands, what this involves. There's a company called Urban Hatch actually in Hong Kong, which does this very well and provides the support to companies. And then when that person is off on maternity leave, they again get the support from the company, they get the kind of mental support. And then when they're looking to come back in, they're sort of, ramped up into their role, just being dropped back into the workforce. I mean, when I went back to work after sort of 8 months of maternity leave, I couldn't remember how to left click on my mouse. Because on a Mac it's slightly different and you have to sort of hold something down. And honestly, I kind of sat there for half a day, kind of just not able to remember how to really work. Right. Something you just do so naturally, normally. And that's just a tiny example of just the confidence that you lose and the sense of, maybe I've been out of this for too long and things will have moved on. And, there's a huge amount of mental kind of bias that goes on there. So, yes, maternity leave is a massive, massive drop-off point for many women. It's the reason I set Hopscotch up, and but there is support out there to help with that. And like I said, the most successful companies where this is concerned do that very, very well.
That's very interesting. We have one more question. I think this is an ever-going discussion on the topic. We have one Marissa Meyer, who is the CEO of Yahoo. She had tried to set a benchmark with maternity leave. What's your take on that? The CEO of Yahoo, she has sparked a debate from both the genders.
I'm not sure what that question means. So what kind of benchmark? What does that mean exactly?
I'll just publish this for you so that you're able to see it. Here it goes. So I'll repeat the question. Maybe I think he's just asking your opinion on the fact that how Yahoo CEO has tried to set a benchmark through the maternity leave, and the kind of setup that she has probably implemented has embarked the debates, not just from the females, from males as well. So just your opinion on it. I think that's what the Professor Zahir is looking for. Yes.
So my opinion on setting benchmarks. Oh, she got back to. Oh, I see what you mean. So she personally set a benchmark because she got back to work within a week. That's a personal choice. I don't know. A benchmark. I mean, with my first baby, I felt that I should take some more time, so I had 8 months off. With my second baby, I had 4 months. I literally couldn't wait to get back to work. He was a complete nightmare. And with my third baby, I had Hopscotch up and running by that point. So I wasn't that personal, but I didn't really switch off properly, and I was definitely in meetings within a couple of weeks of being out of hospital. So, it's completely a personal choice. And I think
yes,
you have policies within companies that protect against that if that's not what you want.
So that's it. So he's also saying the same. Being the CEO, she asks her employees also to follow the suit. However, the person agrees with your absolutely the content. Yes, it is absolutely a personal choice of women, in addition to the kind of workplace policies already given. All right, Helen. I think the last thing that we would like to know from you is, after you started the Hopscotch, which is absolutely, many people have even posted here that they would want to get associated with you, and they're trying to find ways to reach out to you. How do you feel that there have been some evident changes in the plight of women, employment, equality? Anything that you personally felt that, yes, this was worth it in the past few years since your journey started, especially with this venture?
So for me, I think that, we've been very lucky to be recognised. So we've won, I think, nearly 20 awards for our work now. Having opportunities like this, which obviously I wouldn't have had in the past, to talk about things that I'm incredibly passionate about, also makes a huge difference. And I think, the one thing for me, I run on my passion. So I don't do something unless I'm very passionate about it. And my my own career has taken many kind of handbrake turns because of that. But one of the things that's really kept me going has been seeing the impact that it's had on the women within our own network. So when I do either online events or on-ground events, when women get opportunities to return to work, sometimes they'll call me like super excited because they've been selected for one of these return to work initiatives that we do regularly with our clients. And just seeing the response and the uplift really in women's attitudes and opportunities is what keeps me going with this. And there's so much further to go. And I think, the day that I solve this problem is the day that I no longer have a job to do. And that really is kind of where I'm heading, I hope. And certainly with our future projects. And, I would love for people to follow us. So like I said, there's so much positive stuff that we put out there from an inspirational perspective. You can get us if you jump onto your Instagram now. We are Hopscotch.work. So please give us a follow and follow all our inspirational stuff and videos. You can find us on YouTube, same Hopscotch.work, on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So I would love to see more of you guys out there following us and hopefully just getting some inspiration and getting that mindset right we talked about.
And that reminds me of an interesting intake. I went through a post and it says that you're also working on your book. So what are you expecting?
So this talk is actually kind of loosely based around the book itself. So talking about, my own experience and bringing a kind of opinion to that in terms of building gender equal businesses and the best examples that I've seen and some of the worst examples that I've seen, but also other people's opinions as well. So business leaders, community leaders that I've talked about, interviews with them and them just giving their perspective on this and what needs to be done. And it's very much a kind of future looking book. It's something that gives hope for the future and gives kind of benchmarks, if you like, to move things forward.
That's amazing, and we of course wish you very good luck. And is there anything as a closing remark that you would like to tell all the females around you, just to be keeping up with our ambitions and keeping up and with the consistent hard work, so that we all keep working? Anything specifically as an advice would you like to give us to all of us?
Yeah, so I was asked the question, and I'm guessing quite a lot of you are probably far younger than I am out there. I was asked the question in a recent panel, what advice would you give to your younger self? And that advice would be always listen to your own gut, to your gut feeling, to your instincts. Don't try to second guess yourself. Don't worry that if what you're thinking is not what 90% of the people around you are thinking, that's a very, very good thing, and it will set you apart from everybody in a very, very positive way. So don't waste your time trying to fit in. Don't waste your time trying to second guess yourself and your instincts. Just go for it.
Thank you so much, Helen. I think this conversation it was so interesting, and we can absolutely feel the spark and the fire with which you work for this cause. And at the last step, definitely, I would like to say and extend a very, very warm thank you. This has been a very enriching session, I should say. And few words, I think it's definitely a takeaway to remember the why, what, and hows of everything that is existing around us. The awareness which is needed, the drive for the change which is needed in our society. And with the adequate practice, the laws, everything definitely we have kept today in our mind, and especially women out there has to remember to keep those ambitions still in you. It was such an empowering session, full of ideas, full of your opinions and experiences. Believe me, it helps us a lot. And it's been so inspirational. I think it's so important that we should look beyond the ceiling, not just to break it, just to look beyond the ceiling. And as various forums have suggested, maybe it's the time, maybe we should now the focus has to be off women, allow us to search more broadly for solutions and take a holistic approach. And because when we eliminate the blind spots, I think the bigger picture will come to the view, which could be about the systems, norm, culture, biases that must be addressed before our workplaces and world can see equal. And Helen, you remind us to say again for you, in the words of Emma Watson, she says, it is the time that we all see gender as a spectrum instead of two sets of opposing ideals. Once again, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to all the participants for joining us. It has been super interesting. I think we can reach out to you again for some insightful views. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, everybody. Stick with us. We have more sessions coming up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's participated. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It has been super interesting. Good day.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.